Hello. On this episode of Forge and Anvil, we will discuss how the Tennessee Three is distracting from the real victims of the Nashville School Shooting, and how even conservative media has fallen for this narrative switch. Next, we'll talk about how California is hoarding abortion pills amid uncertainty at the federal level about the status of the drugs. Then we'll cover how the Biden DOJ has recommended no jail time for a pro-abortionist, who vandalized a Catholic church. Finally, we'll end our time together with some good news, so stay tuned. We are joined tonight again by Anastasia Hibbs. So Anastasia, please introduce yourself.
I work for my dad, Steve Dace, who has his show on The Blaze, The Steve Dace Show. My husband and I have been married for 6 months this weekend, so still in the honeymoon phase. That kind of sums me up, honestly.
Awesome. Well, welcome. And we are also blessed to be joined by first-time guest, Katelyn James. So Katelyn, please tell the audience who you are and what you do.
Hey, I'm Katelyn. I am Baptist. I was homeschooled, and I'm a big pro-life. Well, I'm not a big pro-life activist, but I'm big into being a pro-life activist, and I'm very against abortion.
Well, welcome. Glad to have you. And as always, I'm joined by regular co-host Michael Aber.
Hi, friends. I'm a student of Scripture and desire to see the righteousness of God restored to his people.
All righty, well, let's get into our first story. So this is from the Tennessee Conservative. This is drama of Tennessee 3 takes attention away from Nashville tragedy. Drama surrounding the disciplining of 3 Democratic lawmakers after they used the House floor to indulge in activism has taken attention away from grieving families and from finding answers for what led a disturbed woman to take the lives of 3 adults and 3 children in a recent Nashville tragedy. In what some say was a coordinated stunt, Democratic Representatives Justin Jones, Gloria Johnson, and Justin Pearson egged on the massive protesters that inundated the Tennessee State House of Representatives in the wake of the Covenant school shooting, while Jones utilizing a bullhorn to shout along with them. Last week, Jones and Pearson were expelled from their seats, while Johnson retained hers by 1 vote. Yesterday, the Nashville Metro Council voted to appoint Jones to fill the vacant seat from which he was expelled. House rules state that no member can be expelled twice for the same violation. Representative Susan Lynn called the 3 defiant and disrespectful. While we are grieving the Covenant school tragedy, they choose to raise themselves up, making themselves higher than the poor victims and their families. They use the victims to repeatedly get on the news to score political points for themselves, said Lynn. They should be ashamed of their actions. The 3 appeared on Good Morning America yesterday and were visited by Vice President Kamala Harris. Their plight was used as an excuse to fundraise by Knox County Democrats. Meanwhile, despite interest and public demand, the manifesto that MNPD found among the Covenant shooters' belongings has yet to be released. It has widely been reported that Audrey Hale identified as male at the time of the shooting and was being treated for an emotional disorder. Some conservative voices are asking if the cocktail of hormones and medication that Hale was likely taking could have contributed to her crimes. Side effects of taking testosterone for women can include mood swings, anger, and hostility. The larger the dose, the more likely the increase in these side effects. Women who are prescribed testosterone as part of gender-affirming care report feelings of frustration, anger, and irritability for no reason. Depending on the dose, it can also cause depression and even destabilization of bipolar or schizoaffective disorder. So, a lot to unpack there, but Anastasia, we'll go to you for the initial reaction.
Yeah, I think I have 2 first thoughts. Is when the last time I came on here is when all of this had just been starting and all of this had just been happening. And one of the things that I had made prominent that I did not want to do was politicize the moment, which was children are dead, people are dead. And I remember saying that our president and the people in that office often politicize these events for their own benefit. And ding, 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 we have a winner because I was correct. Because then they turned around and did the exact thing that I said they were going to do the last time I was here. which it's not funny. I smile and laugh because it's like when you see a car accident and you're so shocked that that's the only thing you know how to do, because it's sickening, because children are dead and people are dead, and that's what we should be focusing on. So that's one. Two, when you are reading off, side effects of medicine that people are taking when they're trying to be someone they weren't born to be, and it's causing this effect or this effect or this effect, it just makes me know even harder that we are in the correct fight against things like this, that we're not just fighting for this because we woke up one day and thought, maybe we don't want you to have what you want to have. It's like when you're a mom and your kid wants to go run on the highway because look at all the shiny cars. It's not that you hate them and you don't want them to have a good life or want them to have fun. It's because you know something that's going to hurt them and you want to save them from that. And so when you're reading it does this or it does that, or, thinking of people, any time I hear stories like this about like transgender people, I think about Chloe Cole, because I feel like out of a lot of people, like she's been one of the most prominent people to stand up and all of the hate that she's gotten and everything. But I think about the life that she will never get to live because of what happened to her when she was younger. And so hearing those side effects makes me know and realize that no matter the hate that we get, no matter the backlash that we get, no matter what names we're called, that we're fighting the good fight every single day.
Yeah. Katelyn, did you follow this story very much?
I'm curious, what were they being kicked out for? Like, what was their activism about?
So essentially, after this school shooting took place, these three, who are elected Democratic representatives in the state house of Tennessee, they essentially allowed a bunch of protesters into the House floor and were basically disrupting the proceedings of the House. Now, I don't know if I should clarify. I don't know if they let the protesters into the House floor, but the three representatives at least were being disruptive on the House floor and were helping to essentially agitate the protesters who were there essentially protesting. They were trying to get some new gun confiscation legislation essentially passed in Tennessee as a result of this Covenant shooting. So
they were involved in the gun control, like those people that ran in and were like demanding gun control.
Yes. So right after the Covenant shooting happened, there was actually a couple of different state brouhahas, I guess we'll call them, where they're in the Kentucky Capitol, I believe the Florida Capitol, and the Tennessee Capitol. Tennessee Capitol was, I think, the first, though, since the shooting took place here. And so three Democratic representatives essentially broke the House rules and essentially interrupted the proceedings to demand action.
Yeah, I saw the videos of all people trying to get in. I guess my take on that is I'm curious why people are so obsessed with the gun control aspect and nobody's fighting for school security. So we gave $75 billion to Ukraine in like this past year, and I feel like we're doing all this money funding all these things when we could be facing like using that money for school security. You know what I mean? Everyone just immediately goes to gun control when there are other solutions. I think a lot of the times the left goes to their solution and says, this is the only solution. And if you don't agree with me, you hate all these people.
Yeah, it's a pretty common one out of their playbook. So Michael, do you have a response? Yeah, go ahead.
That really quick. I'm sorry.
Please jump in.
Like, to Katelyn's point, I don't want to say that I don't want to say that everyone on the left, doesn't believe in God or doesn't have like a high morality, but a lot of the people that speak for them don't seem to have that. And so when you have people that are throwing fits or doing things like that, that comes from a society that worships self instead of worships him. Because when you worship yourself and you make yourself your own idol or make yourself your God, who cares what you do? Why would it matter? Why would it matter if I am storming this or fighting against this or doing this? From a fellow homeschooler, I thank God I was homeschooled every single day. I don't know about you, but I think that all the time.
I loved it. Yes. Yeah. So
Well, Michael, what was your initial take on the Tennessee 3?
Well, my initial take, I suppose, is that what's disturbing but undeniable is that it's not unique. I think that's my thought when I hear this story and I hear what's taking place. It's not unique. It's not like, wow, I can't believe they would do that, because it's like, okay, well, political activism has been leveraging tragedy since long before any of us were born. And we've seen great evidence of that, be it on either side of the aisle as far as the political bipartisan position would be. In this circumstance, it's just as egregious as any other time. Think of how horrifying it is to people who would otherwise be mourning or trying to find a solution. Because I guess that's just the philosophical difference between a more leftist position, is that their way of trying to find a solution so that this doesn't happen is emotionally motivated, as all of our position would likely be in the face of tragedy, but the emotional motivation lacks logic. And that's where I think a conservative perspective is just confounded by, why would you make this about you? But I would say perhaps in some cases, a liberal would say, it's not about us. We want to protect kids so that doesn't happen again. That's why we need to get gun control laws. Well, it's like, yeah, but you haven't thought that through, because
it's virtue signaling to a point.
Like, of course
they're acting like, because I don't believe in gun control, then I don't care about the kids getting killed, which is absurd.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. And that's why I say it's emotional and not rational, because in theory, yeah, if nobody has guns, nobody's going to shoot each other. That's a great theory. The problem is you cannot control that, and there cannot be an absolute security in that. But the guarantee is that the people who should have guns will have their guns taken away.
Well, I don't know if you guys saw that SNL clip that was going around on Twitter today, but what you're saying makes me think of that, which was this new non-binary comedian named Molly, which is one of the most feminine names I've actually ever heard, but okay. I mean, she went on saying that, if you don't care about trans kids' healthcare, then you don't care about kids, period.
Yeah, I did see that.
Like when you're running an emotional narrative like that, no wonder people don't like us. No wonder people think that we're the bad guys, because it makes us look like we don't have emotions or feelings.
But here's the kicker with that. I care very much about trans kids' healthcare, but hormone therapy is not healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
It's abuse, if we want to look at it that way. But even on the more docile side of things, it's an elective measure that is not necessary medically. So it, by the simplest measure, cannot be called healthcare. And this kind of goes back to the second point I wanted to make about the original article, is that I'm not surprised that a situation like this can be leveraged for political gain, as it always has been and likely will throughout our entire lifetime. I'm also not surprised that testosterone replacement therapy is being pointed at as a culprit for increased, be it emotional trauma, aggressiveness, whatever we want to categorize that as, which I'm not denying that in the slightest. However, we have been in the midst of a mental health epidemic in our culture for many years now that is only getting much worse, and we're seeing the evidence of that through this pseudo-sexual revolution. And testosterone therapy is not the first drug to come along, or the first chemical imbalance in your endocrine system that can cause people to have mood swings and issues mentally. Any medication that you see advertised has a laundry list of all the side effects. So this is not unique.
I will say that it is unique in that it's a woman shooter, which is extremely, extremely rare.
That is true.
For women to be mass shooters.
Statistically, yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
So if we're pointing at something, it makes sense to point at the testosterone. But at the same time, the person was obviously had a lot going on.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot that you could speak to just in terms of the spiritual aspect. I mean, we are obviously in a spiritual war, and the reality is that we've been in a spiritual war since the day we were born, and we will continue to be in the spiritual war until the day that Christ comes back and ends it once and for all. I mean,
Maybe
it's already been
even
ended
before
but,
we
you
were
know,
born, right?
Absolutely. We are in the already and not yet, and until the end comes, we will continue to be in this spiritual warfare. But obviously there's something to be said about the fact that we are seeing an increase in these type of things. So what do you guys think what role does the media play in sort of exacerbating these kind of situations?
A primary role.
Yeah, everything.
This is a conversation that I was having just today with a colleague of mine, that the uniqueness of the way the media can interact with the issues that are going on is that there's a greater number of people who are falling prey to the idea of transgenderism, of sexual dysmorphia, however you want to call that. There's an increase in those people, and a lot of those people are individuals who have suffered a trauma, be it post-traumatic stress disorder. There are veterans and ex-military individuals who are deciding to go down that road because it's being popularized as an identity culture issue. And for someone who is lacking identity and lacking a sense of self, if they can espouse themselves to a movement that is perceived to be greater than it may even be, then they will feel that camaraderie. And what I think media is doing is building a platform on which individuals can find camaraderie in this illness. And it's a cultural identity thing, like much of our cultural identity has been for many years, but now the culture is sexual. It's not just cultural. It has everything to do with your gender, your sexual preference, and that is being commoditized to a way that individuals who are more broken and more susceptible to influence are having easily attainable access to the influence of these, I think, evil outlets. And they're not being given outlets that are constructive or helpful as much as they are being told whenever they open their social media that everything's about transgender activism.
Well, to that point,
Oh,
you go ahead. You go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, I mean, to that point, like, God created us for like, we have an urge to want a relationship. And when people are not looking for a relationship up above, they're going to look for a relationship anywhere else they can find. And you hear that so many times, like, and I mean, people who have been addicted to drugs, people who are alcoholics, like they found a relationship with this and they found a relationship with this. And I mean, I did theater here in Des Moines for so many years, which prayers are appreciated for that whole mess. But anyways, you know, but I knew so many kids who you would hear them be like, oh, well, I don't really fit into school, or I don't really fit in here. And when you have this community, that's like, we love everyone, no matter who you are, what you choose to do. We love you wherever you're at, and this and this and this and that. You know, it's not easy to be a Christian and have to set your pride and set your ego aside. Because if it was easy, everyone would be in a relationship with God. Everyone would be a Christian. So when you have this group that, you know, kind of has, you know, Jesus meets us where we're at, you know what I'm saying? But there is a side of you that has to put yourself behind and understand that you are not the highest being. And I think that's where people have the hardest problem. And when you go to this community that says, you can do whatever you want, be whoever you want, have sex with whoever you want, go do whatever you want. I mean, why would you not want to join a group like that when you're praising self again and not praising God?
Yeah.
I think it's like the thing of this generation, because before it was the hippie movement, right? Where everyone's like, oh, we love everyone how they are. And now this generation, it's the LGBTQ and trans stuff. And it's like everybody wants to be unique. But like they said in The Incredibles, when everybody's super, nobody is.
Absolutely. It really boils down to the idea of transhumanism. And it's the idea that we can be like God in the fact that we can control nature. We are malleable beings that can be shaped and formed to whatever way we want. That's where, I mean, we see the rise in this. I mean, Dylan Mulvaney, for example, I only bring him up because he so immediately switches into people's minds nowadays because he's everywhere, whether you like it or not. Both people hating on him and just making content out of him and whatnot. But what I was going to say specifically about him is he is not a man identifying as a woman. He is actually a man specifically identifying as a little girl. He has said that on multiple occasions. And then you see the furry movement. We see individuals identifying as a fursona, and there are more and more unique identities that are being created every day. There's an endless stream of them. And it's really just this idea of transhumanism, that we can transcend our humanity in the created order and become something else. And unfortunately, it seems like it's here to stay.
And I think that whole shaking your fist at God, like God made me this way, but he was wrong. I'm actually supposed to be this way. I think that actually stems back to the abortion thing, which is women getting pregnant and they're denying this pregnancy that God gave them and killing a human. And I feel like it started with that, this whole denying what God has done for you and deciding to change it yourself.
Well, I think I feel like it even goes deeper than that, because at the end of the day, every issue boils down to, the question, what is right and what is wrong? And then, I mean, your definition of right could be different than mine and everything else. So the question really boils down to, do you believe in God or not? Because if you do, then I don't know about you guys, but the Bible makes it pretty crystal clear. Like I've never understood when people are like, I don't really get what this means. And it's like, do not murder. I'm like, I'm like that woman with all the math problems in the meme. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, that's pretty obvious to me what he's talking about, So I think it also always boils down to, because I mean, and it's like a lot of times, sometimes conservatives will be like, well, I'm not a Christian. Well, then why are you getting up and fighting for this what is right and what is wrong? Because if you have no moral root and moral foundation and what is right and what is wrong, what are you fighting for? Why are you getting up? Why are you getting a job? Why are you joining this group? Why are you getting married? Why are you having kids? Everything boils down to one question. Do you believe in God or not?
Yep. We believe that there is a God and we are not him. And that's a huge distinction.
Just to make that clear.
Which what you're talking about, Anastasia, is that is the blanket that can be cast onto all ethical issues, is how we define our morality. If our morality is relative, then there is no morality, because my morality is different than yours. We have the incredible privilege and joy of having a baseline morality that is dictated by Scripture in accordance to the will of God. And that makes it pretty clear for us. Problem is, we're in a culture that doesn't accept that largely, and we will likely never be in a culture that accepts that wholly in this lifetime. But as far as what we're talking about with like the transgender stuff, the more content that I consume that is discussing these issues, whether it be activists on either side of the aisle, the more I'm believing that it's a complete misnomer when there's debates about the biological implications. Because what is being debated is not a biological construct. If it were, then individuals who are supporting transgenderism would clearly change sides. Like if it was just about biology, and you're looking at dudes who identify as women that are absolutely destroying women's athleticism, like biology has nothing to do with it. It's a social construct. And this is what Connor is even talking about. It's an identity construct where it's a social issue. So if you approach a social issue with empirical data from a biological perspective, then you're not going to carry weight in an argument. You're not going to persuade someone who is motivated by social variance. And those social variants are going to be very personalized and emotionally stimulated. So
it reminds me of that scene. in Matt Walsh's What is a Woman, where he like goes to that tribe and he's trying to explain to them all this stuff.
Yeah.
And they're like, what in the HE double hockey sticks is this guy talking about? They're like, we've never heard this. You know what I'm saying? That's what that reminded me of.
Yeah. Because
Absolutely.
biology is not questionable,
Mhm.
but people's perceived understanding of themselves from a social perspective is once again subject to relativity, relative morality in how you define oneself.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we live in a postmodern age where truth is relative. At least that's the culture that we live in. Of course, we don't believe that. We know we can find truth in scripture. You can find truth in nature. And that's why the founders, of course, drew upon that in the founding documents. We believe in, in nature's God is how it was worded, in fact. But naturally, we still have to deal with a society that believes that truth is malleable. So have any of you guys, in fact, I'll start with you, Anastasia. Have you found a easy argument against that postmodernist belief style that truth is relative and we can never find truth no matter how hard we try?
I think that's a difficult question because when I feel like going into conversations with some of these people is hard because I mean, you're fighting a fight that started way, way, way before us, which is, good against evil. And it doesn't help when our own side sometimes doesn't have their eyes set on the big picture either. So personally, I find that difficult to answer. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. I find it hard to answer that question without bringing in, your morality and where you thought you came from and why do you think you're here, and getting into a deeper, more rooted conversation. Maybe that's just me. That's just what I think.
Yeah. Well, same question to you, Katelyn.
For me, I would bring it back to like pain, because pain is one of the ultimate realities, right? And like everybody takes that seriously and everyone feels it. So a lot of people believe that it's wrong to harm somebody else. Now, everybody has different ideas of harm, right? Like I believe that abortion harms another person, but then other people believe that forcing a woman to be pregnant is harmful. But the idea of harm is usually a really common topic that I feel like you can bring that back to an ultimate truth that people are more willing to agree with. And you can find some common ground with like pain and harm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, pain is definitely something that you can relate to people on, even when they can't necessarily relate on facts. It's like, the popular phrase from Ben Shapiro, facts don't care about your feelings. Well, the opposite is that feelings don't care about your facts. And that's something that we have to wrestle with, especially in today's culture that is much more focused on their feelings as opposed to their facts.
Right. So if my truth is that it's okay to like smack somebody, like, no, obviously that's not my truth because nobody else agrees with that. So that's kind of just, that's a pretty universal truth that you can't smack other people. You know what I mean? Because it hurts them.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, not even everyone's going to agree with you on that point, which is
right. But that's boiling it down to that. You just keep boiling it down.
Yeah, absolutely. But that kind of brings us to our next story from Politico. So blue states are buying up abortion medication amid legal uncertainty. So Sacramento, California and other blue states are rushing to stockpile abortion medication amid uncertainty at the federal level about the status of the drugs. Governor Gavin Newsom said Monday that California had secured 250,000 misoprostol pills. I'm assuming I'm saying that right, but if I'm not, I don't care. These pills don't deserve proper pronunciation. And negotiated the purchase of up to 2 million. The latest move by a state that has repeatedly tried to shore up abortion access in the face of restricted laws elsewhere. The announcement follows a Texas judge decision to invalidate the Food and Drug Administration's approval for mifepristone, other medication commonly used in the procedure. We will not cave to extremists who are trying to outlaw these critical abortion services, the Democratic governor said in a statement. Medication abortion remains legal in California. There's more in the article that we can get into, but Katelyn, I just thought, going off of what you were saying of the idea that everyone universally believes that it's not acceptable to slap a person. Here we have a state that is now stockpiling these abortion drugs. So what's your initial reaction to that?
Okay, here's my thing. What's the reason that they're restricting these drugs? It's because it hasn't passed FDA requirements for safety and testing for women, because women can die from them. So this state that is saying we care about women so much that we want them to have abortions wants to hand out a drug to all these women that isn't even safe. It hasn't even passed all the requirements. That is so bizarre to me.
Well, this is the state that cares about women so much that they are making sure that there's
Can I
no
just
such
say,
thing as a safe
California
bathroom.
sucks.
They don't care about women. They don't. As a woman, that's offensive.
Yeah, and I wanted to actually elaborate on that. So as a woman, if someone of Michael's stature, and if you don't know, Michael is 6'7". So someone of Michael's stature, if he was to walk into the restroom, say, I mean, how is that going to make you? What are your initial gut reaction if either of you two were to see someone of Michael's size just walk into the women's restroom with you?
I'll probably
Let's say
agree
with a
you
beard as well.
slapping someone. That's probably what I do. I'd slap someone. Honestly.
No, I would dash out, or I would just okay, so most people, if they walk in, they're like, oh, I made a mistake, and walk out, right? But if he walks in and is just standing there, I would just leave. I would just get out of there as quick as I could. I mean, I'm not going to engage in conversation with someone in my space.
Yeah. So to the point about the abortion bills, then, so this standard of morality, California is setting what maybe someone would describe as anarcho-tyranny, which is basically just the idea that they are going to allow the drug users to remain on the streets, but they are going to penalize someone like you for being a bigot, for not wanting to share your what should be same-sex space with a member of the opposite sex.
Yeah.
Michael, what was your initial reaction to the article?
It falls in line with the direction that our culture is going in a lot of ways, like what we've already talked about with women being devalued and women being undermined. It's what a privilege we can shove medication down women's throats so that we can make sure that they don't have the babies we don't want. And who will fall victim to that? Women will fall victim to that. And if the statistics are correct, most likely the minority women will fall victim to those procedures and to those drugs that would take place of the actual procedures of abortions. So, yeah, exactly what we're saying. This political agenda and virtue signaling saying that we need to stand for women and for minorities. Okay, well, how are we going to do that? We're going to make white men identify as women and become Woman of the Year. Is that supporting women? Is that really encouraging femininity? Or let's make sure that women have questionable drug uses and encourage them not to become mothers. Does that promote femininity? I don't know. This topic gets me kind of frustrated, so I'm starting to sound like my dad. But
well, not to mention Florida, they have that 6-week heartbeat bill proposed, right? They included $30 million to support women and to support pregnancy resource centers. Which state is caring about women here?
Yeah. Well, Tennessee pledged $100 million to that as well. Please go ahead, Anastasia.
Sorry. Something that baffled me was when all the Roe v. Wade stuff really was gearing up and everybody was pissed. How many women were mad and going after pregnancy centers? And yes, it doesn't confuse me. I understand why, but it's something that still baffles me because I've toured so many of them. I've helped so many of them. I've met so many of these women who, I mean, Katelyn, I'm sure you can attest to this. Like, they don't really do this for that much money, if any money at all. They spend almost all their time there. I mean, after hours, before hours, on days they're not even supposed to be there. And it's probably the most feminist thing you can do is help at a pregnancy center like that, because you're a woman sacrificing your time, your resources, your money to help other women who don't have that time, who don't have those resources, who don't have that money. And I mean, I remember when I did so there's like an Iowa Jane collective here that likes to deliver abortion pills all over here in Iowa. And they were doing an abortion doula training, and it was a 4-hour training, but it was over Zoom. So you could not have your camera on, you didn't have to talk and everything. So I thought, let's do this. And I signed up for it, and I did the whole 4 hours because I think a common mistake that sometimes our own side makes is not doing the research about what they are doing. And kind of, you don't have to, just because you dip your toes into what's happening doesn't mean you're going to be fully into the pool. It's important to know what kind of research they're doing or what they're telling their people. And I mean, I remember them teaching about, this is how you go to these women's homes and you manually vacuum out the baby yourself. No doctors needed, all of that kind of stuff. And I had all of that posted in a video with all of that paperwork and everything on my dad's show, and them telling women that, like, especially for doulas, telling them to bring headphones just in case of during the abortion they change their mind, so they can put those headphones on, listen to the music, and start zoning out with what's happening around them. And so I think it's something where, you know, it makes me wonder how many women actually understand the depths of what they're deciding to do, but also countering that, how many women take a training like this or decide to do something like this, and they are the ones duct taping those headphones onto those women so they can listen to music and not hear their babies cry.
So horrible. And it's a reality. I mean, I think one of the hard things is that there are many individuals who do not know what the procedure actually looks like. And then there are many individuals as well who know roughly what it's about, but can hardly stomach it. And, you know, not saying there's anything wrong with that. You should be absolutely disgusted by it. But so, Anastasia, what you did was something that most people in the pro-life movement do not have the guts to do because they can't handle the details. So how did you, first of all, get the strength to go through that, as well as how did it initially affect you when you initially got off that Zoom call?
I mean, to get the strength to do that is to look at the numbers, I think, honestly, and to look at the amount of babies that have been murdered. And I mean, going back to how do you fight this battle with people that, you know, don't want to have a morality conversation, like, you need to do your research and understand what is happening, especially in your own state. Because I mean, my dad has a prominent radio show. He's big here in Iowa, but like, even he did not know some of this stuff because it's mostly geared towards women and they're mostly doing their advertising towards women. And I found it honestly on a fluke trying to do research, and they were doing this whole Zoom training. They've blocked me now, so I got that under my belt, I guess. But I think the thing that fuels my fire is knowing that, well, one, knowing that God hates murder, for one. And two, knowing that ever since I was a little girl, the dream of being a mother, I mean, to this day, just thinking about it and thinking about all the interactions I'll have with my children and being able to be in our marriage the only person who can do that, brings me to tears, to just thinking about the idea. And that's such a beautiful and magical thing. And I feel like so many women, I mean, put the wool over their eyes or the headphones over their ears and don't truly understand what's happening. So I feel like being able to shed some light on that, like, guys, they're talking about you behind their backs. They know exactly what they're doing, gets me fired up, because it makes me realize that some of these abortion doulas are meeting behind your back and then coming to your home and saying, hey, it's okay, we're here for you. But no, I just sat through that 4-hour training as they're talking about, you don't need a doctor there, just be really careful as you're using the vacuum apparatuses shown in documents. You just have to make sure that they know there's going to be some bleeding when they take those pills. Katelyn, you know better than anyone. I'm sure that that's not just going to be a little bit of light spotting after that happens and after that occurs. And then telling them to be there by the phone for them 24/7. Sometimes they'll just need some privacy. You know, a lot of women don't understand the emotional turmoil because they're not being shown or told all of those things. So, yeah, I mean, that's not easy on me as someone who's pro-life, conservative, and a woman, for one. But I think about the knowledge that I learned from that, from what they're really, really doing, that it's not just, oh, it's okay, it's no big deal, you won't even feel anything. And after you're done, it's going to be so great because then you can go on living your life. And it sparked me on this journey where I talked to so many women after that who, I mean, I remember speaking over Skype with this like 60, 70-year-old woman who says, I still think about that baby every single day.
You either have a child for the rest of your life or you have an abortion to regret for the rest of your life.
Exactly. And so and when you put it in terms like that, how can that not fuel a fire inside of you to learn things about them? And I'm not saying because also I think the big thing to point out about that is it was free. So I was not donating any money to any cause. I was not giving them any money to go out and continue to do things. It was a free thing, you know, because I don't condone paying money to go to things like that, because they're just going to turn around and use your money to do things like that. But it was free. And, you know, afterwards, I remember turning that off, and my husband watched some of it with me. And, you know, after a while, he ended up kind of leaving and then coming back. And I just remember saying, you know, I don't know, but my fire was fueled. I was ready to continue on to a good fight. And it pissed me off, honestly.
Yeah, understandably.
The fact that it was free is kind of freaky too, because it feels kind of cultish. Like they just want to spread this information and like harm people.
And the fact that it was on a Saturday, it was 4 hours long, and there were over 100 people in there, just like in the Des Moines, Iowa area. And I think about and you know, maybe 90 of them were people like me trying to learn. I don't know. But I just think about the fact that if that's not the case, 99 of those people were in there to listen and to learn how to go out and do this as well.
Yeah. Spread this gospel of death. So we are in a culture specifically that targets men and really wants men to be silent on this issue. I would say, especially after like the era of Me Too, I think many men feel like they have to be very careful about what they say when it comes to any issue that's about a woman's body. So what kind of advice can you two give to our male audience? Because our audience is majority male. I believe about 60% of our audience is men from ages 25 to 35. So a lot of these men that are essentially going to be in the age category that is going to be potentially dealing with having a pregnant woman as their individual, their significant other. So what kind of advice do you have for these men on how they can approach this topic, given that it is so culturally sensitive?
You mean pro-life men?
Pro-life men, just pro-life men, or maybe men who are unconvinced, that, you know, just are not sure. But when it comes to talking about either having reservations about abortion or being straight up against it.
I mean, men should be talking about it and disagreeing with it.
Of course.
I think abortion is largely a male issue because a lot, like, I don't remember the statistic, but most women said that if their partner was supportive, they would want to keep the baby. So it seems like there's a lot of men out there unsupportive, and abortion is no small thing. Like, it seems, I guess, to these women like, oh, I'll go and I'll end this pregnancy and it will be over. But it's just not over. You're messing with your hormones, you're messing with your fertility, you're messing with this stuff, and it can affect you the rest of your life. And women can end up never being able to have children. And it's just, if men are protecting women, they will protect them from abortion.
I guess I would have, I guess I have three things, I think. One, my first thing is it takes two to tango. Everybody out there knows what I'm talking about. So that's my one. Two, I think an important thing is to do your research as well. Because, I mean, again, it's not like this kind of research is some underground discovery that nobody knows and everything. You know, like it's, everybody does know. Everybody knows the facts. Everybody knows the science. I don't know about you, Katelyn. I feel like we're past the point. Yes, I understand that some people are still like, but it's not a baby, and when it's this and that and everything else. But that's not the main argument anymore. It's I want to do what I want to do, and that's that, period. And because I don't hear much of the science debate anymore, because
except for that Guardian photo, which is total baloney.
Yeah,
where they just bleached a gestational sac and took out the baby. Who believes that? Ooh.
And I think my third thing would be is if you were standing on the side of the road and you saw a child playing in traffic and you saw a car coming, would your reaction be, well, where's its mom? And it's the mom gave birth, so let's give her the authority. Let's let her choose. Does she want to save this? I don't know, and all of that. Or would your knee-jerk reaction be, I'm going to run out, I'm going to grab that child, I'm going to save them from whatever harm comes their way?
Yeah, that's a great mental challenge. Yeah, and unfortunately, you know, we do live in a time where there actually, despite the popular narrative, there has been a lot of polling done that actually suggests that there are at least as many pro-life women as there are pro-abortion women. And I'm going to say pro-abortion very intentionally, because it's hardly about choice these days, because so many of these states, if it was all about choice, they would have stayed with what Roe v. Wade was with the first trimester ruling. But instead, now we've got abortion up until and sometimes after birth. So that shift occurred really overnight, it seemed like, over the past a couple of years. I don't know if it was because Roe v. Wade was in question, but I mean, Colorado put out legislation that is abortion up until birth. So, Michael, what kind of response do you have to what Katelyn said about men and being providers, as well as you know, being more involved in this pro-life conversation?
This is a difficult conversation. It aches my heart to even think of these things, and pardon me that I'm getting emotional, but maybe that's the point, is that for women who have undergone this, as well as men, we had a comment that a gentleman had his child aborted by the child's mother. And I think what I want to first say is just, if you are a victim of either your own doing or the doing of someone else, please know that the position that we would promote is not one of condemnation, but rather, I would hope and pray that you can find a community of Christ-centered people who can love you and find redemption in the midst of that. It's really disturbing to me that this is so widespread an issue. And it should be gut-wrenching for every man who watches this. It's not acceptable. And we should be stronger.
Absolutely. Yeah. The reality is, too, I agree with you, Katelyn, there are many men who need to step up. And that's something that Michael and I, especially in our private conversations, talk a lot about. We talk a lot about the Peter Pan syndrome of these boys who are of manhood age, but are not being men. And that is an unfortunate reality that we have to deal with, that we have weak men, and that is a lot of what has caused this societal rot that is abortion. I mean, unfortunately, you can throw it on both genders and say that there are many women who are using it as birth control, and that's obviously wrong in its own right. But either way, we do need more strong men. So, Michael, what kind of practical steps would you give some of our audience members on how they could be better providers?
Well, step one is choosing a good woman. If you want to be a serious man and a serious husband, then you better take your selection seriously. And harsh as it may sound, entertaining a woman who is not strengthened in their ideology and in their convictions of morality fuels the fire that would cause individuals to fall into complacency. I think there's and even more so now when people are all confused about their sexuality anyway, it's easy to be discouraged as a man seeking a godly, righteous woman, and it's discouraging to think that you could find someone who agrees with a moral, principled stance that is based in a foundation in Christ. And if you find your salvation in Christ, which I certainly hope you do, and if you don't, I'd encourage you to get that sorted out. Because there's a lot more to this than just being an advocate in a public forum. Something my dad always taught me growing up was that microeconomics and micro governance is much more important than macroeconomics and macro governance, and that we make decisions as autonomous individuals that associate with a collective. And if you can associate with a collective that has a principled moral stance on things such as these, then you'll be better equipped to make those decisions in your personal life and make those decisions in who your spouse will be and the decisions that you make with her. I'm incredibly privileged and incredibly blessed to have found a woman that resonates scriptural values and resonates biblical femininity. And I can't imagine anything more attractive than that to me. And it's a great blessing. So as far as men taking steps in that direction, to a certain extent, I would say, kind of like Jordan Peterson says, clean your room. And I mean that not as much as the literal clean your room, as much as to say, handle what is yours to handle. And if you can manage to get your life in order, then maybe a woman who has her life in order will be attracted to that. And if you can manage to unite yourself in biblical covenant with a woman who has a purpose and a morality that is set in righteousness, then perhaps you can procreate with that woman and raise children to be upstanding individuals that promote righteousness as well. And if we had more people just focusing and committing to those individual simple practices, I think we'd be better off as a society, because we wouldn't. I mean, look at our society. The people that are falling prey to this are trying not to procreate and are trying to reduce their fertility, whether they know it or not. If we could just get our act together as Christians and as conservatives, and as, conservatism doesn't even matter as much as the gospel, in my opinion. And we've had other episodes about the congruency between those two things. But if we could just get our act together at home and spend less time looking at social media and more time looking at the people that we love and in the mirror and at scripture, then maybe we'd be able to make a bigger impact through the world that we live in the context that we have set ourselves in.
I also think people should homeschool, because
Yep.
if we do, we can outbreed them, and then they can't indoctrinate our kids if we put them in public school. Because a lot of teachers in public, not all, I know some very sweet Christian, very kind public school teachers, wonderful people, but there are truly nefarious people going into the public schools to teach in order to indoctrinate children. So, and these people aren't having kids, so they're trying to indoctrinate your kids.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
outbreed and homeschool.
Yeah. And homestead.
Yeah.
That has been, honestly though, that's been a strategy that a lot of different groups have had for centuries. The Catholics did a really good job of that and became a worldwide nation of Catholicism. And Muslims do an incredible job of that as well.
Yeah.
And Mormons do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah.
Talk about non-Christian religious groups. Mormons
Okay, but
have
they're
a huge
so
influence on our
nice.
culture. Yeah.
They are. We did a whole episode on Mormonism with Lynn Wilder. I would highly
I need to
encourage
go back and watch
our
that.
audience
That
to
sounds
should
listen to
interesting.
it. It was a great episode. I did want to go into the chat just briefly because that same individual had mentioned that they don't feel worthy of forgiveness. They thanked us for the kind words. And they mentioned that Jesus has helped a lot, but it's very hard not to hate themselves. And the reason why I'm not mentioning a name, I usually mention names of our chat, but you were very personal with us. So out of respect for you, and unless you tell me you want me to mention your name, I'm not going to mention that. But Michael, could you just address that that lack of self-worth for forgiveness and struggling to hate oneself?
Sure. Yeah. Let me assure you, brother, you're not worthy. That's kind of the point. You have an opportunity to know a Messiah and a man who is the living God, who has chosen to sacrifice himself for you. You are not worthy, but you are chosen. And his grace is sufficient for all of your sins, and it is sufficient for the sins of those who have sinned against you. His grace will not only overcome your own self-hatred, but the hatred that you may have for the people that have wronged you. And you can be called to a greater success and a greater joy and a greater purpose than ever imagined before. And I believe that Jesus has given us a directive and a way with which we can live that life of sanctification. Sanctification is just a big Christianese word meaning that we can be made more like God in his goodness, but only through our submissiveness to his will in our lives. So
Can I add on to that really quick?
Please.
Do you mind?
sure.
I would urge you, whoever you are, to pick up your Bible and read about the people that Jesus used that you would have never, and those people would have never, ever thought that he could use. And the first one that comes to mind, I mean, obviously, would be Saul to Paul. You know, dude was out there murdering our own homies, and Jesus turned his life around and used him. You know, so when you're, and I think when you lean into the idea that you are not God, that there is a higher being, and that is God. I think that when you really truly lean into that honestly for me is so comforting sometimes. Because when you're praising self and you're all in yourself and you mess up, what does that mean? Oh my gosh, I'm the worst. I messed up. I'm my own God. I made a mistake and all of this stuff. But when you make a mistake or you sin or you mess up and you know, though, that Jesus died for you and for that, and you confess your sins and you know that he is God, there is a huge comfort, I feel like, in knowing that.
There's forgiveness in Jesus Christ. There's freedom in Jesus Christ. And it's almost like in a way arrogant to think that you did something so big that Jesus can't cover over. I was watching The Passion of the Christ on Good Friday, and it's just overwhelming what Jesus did for us. And it seems like almost like too much to accept sometimes. You know what I mean? Like it's just, wow, he really did this. And there's freedom in that, accepting the forgiveness, even though you're not good enough. And it is uncomfortable sometimes to accept forgiveness.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is a gift, and we are adopted into the family of God as sons.
There's nothing
Marys.
so bad that will keep you out of heaven, and there's nothing so good that will get you into heaven.
Yeah. Amen. Well, if
Can
that will
bookend
do.
that? Can I
go ahead.
bookend that real quick with Ephesians chapter 2, verses 4 and on? But God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our own trespasses, he made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved, and raised up with him, with Christ, and seated with him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus, so that in the coming ages he might show the immeasurable riches of his grace and kindness towards us in Christ Jesus. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and it's not of your own doing, it's a gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one can boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them.
Amen. Hair Juicer 3000 said, I had advice from a man locally almost identical to what y'all are saying. Good.
Cool.
Find those individuals and surround yourself with a community of believers who will encourage you and uplift you and hold you accountable on the days that you need it. That being said, I'm going to do a hard transition into another story. We won't spend too much time on this one, but I think it's important to go through. So this is from notthebee.com. Biden's DOJ recommends no jail time for transgender person who vandalized Catholic Church after overturn of Roe v. Wade. We have been complaining for months that the DOJ doesn't care to investigate the pro-abort terrorists and Jane's Revenge folks all across the country who attacked churches and pregnancy centers after the Dobbs leak. But it turns out to no one's real surprise that even if the Biden administration caught one of these criminal vandals, they wouldn't punish them in any way. That's exactly what happened in Washington state, where a transgender pro-abort terrorist who vandalized a Catholic church has been recommended to serve absolutely no jail time by the Biden DOJ. And this is a tweet from Mike Davis. 1. Father defends son praying outside of abortion clinic. Biden DOJ seeks 11 years in prison. 2. Deranged trans person damages Catholic church, assaults worker and police, and terrorizes old lady praying. Biden DOJ seeks no jail time. Let's see the Biden DOJ is on record for supporting the vandalism of Catholic churches and the spying on of Catholic churches by the FBI. The devout Catholic Joe Biden sure doesn't seem to give a crap about his faith. President Biden's Justice Department offered what critics are calling a sweetheart plea deal to a vandal who admitted to defacing a Catholic church with profane graffiti, destroying a statue of the Virgin Mary, assaulting a church worker, and resisting arrest. A plea agreement reviewed by Fox News Digital shows that the DOJ recommends 0 jail time for the perp, a 31-year-old transgender individual who vandalized the St. Louis Catholic Church in Bellevue, Washington, following Roe v. Wade's overturning last June. This trans person vandalized the church, assaulted a coworker, and resisted arrest. Seems to be repeating some of the information there. So, Anastasia, I'd love to go to you for your initial reaction on this.
Do you guys remember the other day when Joe Biden was in Ireland and he was like, I want to stay here? I don't know about you guys, but I was ready for that. I was ready for him to bring his bags there and live there. Again, all of this goes back to serving yourself. And I feel like we are now seeing the result of the parenting that happened when, did you guys ever have those friends that for some reason their parents seemed to let them do whatever they wanted, no matter, even if when they were just absolute jerks? And us homeschool kids were like, wow, I can't believe they get away with talking to their parents like that. My parents would be so mad. We're seeing those children now. They've grown up now. And now they're doing this because they've been ingrained with this mentality that they can go into places and throw a fit and they'll just be given what they want. And sadly, we have a president who's giving them exactly what they were trained to do. I mean, it gives me, it's no surprise that this would happen to me, because putting them, in jail or doing whatever would prove a point that what they're doing is wrong. And they can't do that because that doesn't fit their narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. Anarcho.
To be clear, it's not just the homeschooled kids that had those feelings. Some of us kids in the public school looked around to our sides and thought, what the crap? How are you like this?
And
Mike,
God
you didn't
plucked
go to
you
public
out.
school. You
That's
didn't go
right.
to public school. You couldn't have turned out good. That's how it goes. Yeah. Yeah, well, unfortunately, this just seems to be a recurring theme, and I think you're right, Anastasia, that it's rewarding bad behavior. And unfortunately, the left side of the aisle seems to be able to be allowed to throw a tantrum and no punishment happens. And then Mark Houck, I believe was his name, who was thrown into prison after essentially defending his son outside of an abortion clinic from an activist that was getting a little too uppity. At least that's what I understood the story to have been. So, I mean, when we're living in this two-tier justice system, obviously we have to be aware of it because it's just the reality that we live in. But Katelyn, did you have any initial reaction to specifically, you had mentioned the vandalizing of these pregnancy crisis centers. So what was your initial thought on this?
So my initial thought is this is why we call them pro-abortion and not pro-choice, because they hate the choice of life. They hate it. So they're attacking these pregnancy resource centers that are helping women, that are actually giving them a choice, because a lot of women feel like they don't have a choice. I can't afford diapers. I can't afford formula. I can't afford to even give birth, or they're terrified to give birth because of all the lies they've heard about birth. So there's these centers that are wanting to support women for free, and they're destroying them. They're destroying the choice.
Well, why would they not, though, is my thing. Because why would these people not destroy those centers? Because they want to keep the wool over their eyes or the headphones over their ears and keep them in the clutches, the clutches of evil. Because if they go to these places, I mean, when you go to a pregnancy center, those are some of the nicest women you're ever going to meet. And I want, if you're a woman or if you're a dude or whoever listening to this, like when you go there, they're not judgmental. They're not rude. They're not like, wow, you've thought about getting an abortion? No, they're sitting there and that they spend their lives doing this. They spend some of their own money, some of their own resources, begging people for clothes so they can put them on the backs of your children. So when you go to them, obviously the left or pro-abortionist, whoever, don't want you to go there because you're going to learn the truth. And you're going to learn that, wow, shocker, we actually really love you. That's why we spend our time and our hard-earned money to support you. No wonder they don't want you to go to these places. So they're going to vandalize them. And I mean, I remember, again, going back to all of that, when all of this was happening, this organization they were encouraging girls to throw a girls' wine night, to call pregnancy centers and leave bad reviews and leave mean voicemails and to leave Yelp. And it was this whole like turning it into a game, and whoever got the most negative Yelp reviews could do this, and make sure you do a different, like, it's not because they actually care about you. Like, I hope people start to understand that they're not doing this because they actually care about your well-being. It's just evil. It's just evil.
Yeah. When my mom was volunteering at a pregnancy resource resource center, this woman came in. She had come there from the abortion clinic because the clinic was so disgusting and so nasty. She was terrified to even be in there because of the safety standards of the equipment, and just the whole place was disgusting.
I mean, we remember all those videos when those started coming out, and these nurses would be like, well, you can't even see a doctor until you agree to have this abortion. You can't even see this person, or no, don't go there. They're just going to encourage you out of it. With facts, because they actually care about you. Because I mean, like the pregnancy centers I go to, like they'll help children and they'll help you almost all the way up to like 6 years old. That's a long time.
They throw baby showers for women.
That's a long time to be supported and helped. And they just know, I mean, places like Planned Parenthood and all of that, like they don't do stuff like that. They bring you in and out. And then, you don't get a call from the nice lady like, hey, how are you doing after I murdered your child? No, because that's going to invoke a conversation about what you're actually feeling. It's going to invoke a conversation about what is the aftermath after that. And they don't want to have that conversation with you because they know what you're going to say. Well, actually, I kind of feel like crap. And then what do you go from there? And it's just, now I'm getting pissed. Okay.
You mentioned how women don't feel like they have a choice until they go into these women's centers and birthing centers where they can be encouraged to know their options a little bit better, or know that there are resources available. Something that Connor has spoken to me of before in our personal lives, just the misnomer that it is to think that having a baby has to be the most expensive thing ever. Connor, could you talk about that a little bit, about just the lie that it is that it's going to break the bank and you can't possibly have a baby or it'll ruin your entire life, so you might as well murder it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my wife and I are living on one income, and we have a 1.5-year-old, turning 1.5 tomorrow, actually. And we have baby number 2 on the way. And
Congrats.
Yeah,
thank
that's
you.
awesome.
Thank you. I actually don't think I've said that to the audience yet. So there we go.
Surprise!
Woohoo! All right.
That's so
But
exciting.
yeah, absolutely. And there are many things that, and this goes to you men out there, we're talking about being providers. There are many things that you can do to actually have a family, even in today's crazy let's go Brandon economy. It is still possible. For example, one of the things that you should do if you are wanting to be a provider and do some family building, you should try to get out of debt as quickly as possible. You should go full Dave Ramsey on your debt. Work a second job if you have to, especially if you don't have kids. If it's you by yourself, single guy, I mean, you should be working 2 jobs, absolutely attacking your debt while you are young and able to do that.
He's
If
right.
it's just you and your wife, I mean, maybe while you don't have kids, if she's willing to work, great. You guys can do dual income. And then if you want to go all out again as a man, work full-time job, part-time job, while your wife's also doing full-time, man, you'll kill any debt that you have. So my wife and I essentially did that. We were debt-free when we got married. Actually, we had a little bit of student loan debt that we paid off like immediately after we got married. And from there, we've just been saving our money, and we worked through those Dave Ramsey baby steps, and we bought our first home just this last year. But
That's
one of
so
the
romantic.
well, it's
Getting out of
traditional
debt.
now. Yeah, getting out of debt. Yeah, but
True.
one of the big things, first of all, having realistic expectations. They actually say that statistically, those who spend more on their wedding day are actually more likely to get divorced. I don't know exactly why that is. Maybe it just creates unrealistic expectations for what the marriage is going to look like. I don't know. But we had about a $4,000 wedding. And honestly, if you call in some favors, I called in a friend who DJs. I told him, hey, it's your wedding gift to me. So, just do what you can essentially in the early phases to just keep your expenses down. And then now that I have had our first, we did a home birth. We had a very inexpensive home birth. It worked great. We loved it. My wife loved it. It was everything she wanted out of a birth story. And we cloth diaper. And guys, I'm not the super crunchy dad. That's not necessarily
Yes,
the
you
reason why I
are.
cloth diapered.
That's exactly right.
Just stop trying to deny it. You're super crunchy.
Well, I can say that my wife was the crunchy one who has made me crunchy. That's for sure.
Yep. The women
And
lead
Michael
the
can
way.
testify to that. But
True.
either way, the cloth diapers, guys, cloth diapers. You buy one set of cloth diapers for like $120, and they're machine washable. They're not like old school. You think you're like wrapping a towel with a clothespin on your baby. No, they are like legitimately just little snaps, and your
Okay, but
baby's
how often
covered.
do you have to wash them? Are
We
you like
wash them
daily putting them through the wash?
We have a set of 24 diapers. Man, now we're getting into the thick of it now. We got a set of 24 diapers, and we wash them probably every other day. Literally, all you do, throw it in the wash. They come out completely fine.
But where do they
And-
sit when they're not being washed? When they're dirty and not yet washed?
Oh, today's day and age, you just get yourself one of the diaper bins that is meant to keep the smell out, and just don't use it as a disposable diaper bin. Use it as just a holding diaper bin. No smell. Then all we do, open up the bin, dump it into the wash, and they come out perfectly clean. I have undone diapers right by me, actually. Okay.
What?
They are incredible.
This is a
You
life
guys wanna
hack.
see 'em? This is a life hack. Okay. I did not think we were going to be doing show and tell. This is
Look
what they
at
look
That's not
like.
what I thought it
There
would
you
look like
go.
at all.
Well,
It
they've got
is-
the insert too, right?
Yes. So then all you do is you get your inserts, put your inserts inside. Voila, you got yourself a diaper. My wife even made homemade reusable wipies.
Wow. So do you have trouble with leaking at all?
None.
Okay.
None.
Nice.
None.
Impressive.
I feel like I needed to have an Amazon link for this or something, an affiliate link. So
next session is going to be the crunchy session.
Yeah, honestly.
Let's talk about all things crunchy.
Maybe we'll just have to do that for an episode. Just do all things crunchy. But anyways, we're going a bit off the rails here on my diaper story.
My bad.
Oh no, you're fine. I'm glad you asked questions. It's good to know that someone was interested because but that being said, the point is we do not have like major monthly expenses for having a child, because the other big thing, and this is probably one of the most important things, is find a good church that actually understands the value of family and supports family building. We have a church that has so many young families. It's almost unheard of from where we used to live in Arizona. Now we are in the South and it's incredible. But having that community, we have had so many hand-me-down clothes that we have only bought a couple of pieces of clothes just because we wanted to. We have not needed to buy any clothes. So no clothes, no diapers, a cheap birth. So after that, our daughter's just now eating. She's a little eater. She eats as much as me. It's incredible, actually. But aside from just a little bit larger grocery bill, there we go. So I know that was a lot more than you bargained for,
totally
Michael,
doable.
but I hope that answered your question.
Put up Hairjuicer 3000's comment.
Oh, let me see it.
He says,
K-Dub True said, yo, Hairjuicer 3000. All my work should smell like piss.
Do all my work shirts smell like piss?
Well, do you use like store-bought laundry detergent, or does your wife make the laundry detergent?
Actually, my wife tried to make the laundry detergent. Didn't go well. So we're back to store-bought. But we got
my wife made our
the crunchy store-bought.
Really well.
Okay, I have a recipe. Next episode, I have a recipe for laundry
Crunchy
detergent.
episode.
That's awesome.
I remember
That's
when I
awesome.
was 16 and I was like, wow, when I turn 22, I'm going to be going to crazy parties. I'm going to have crazy things. And now I'm on this podcast talking about crunchy diapers. And that's where I'm at.
You're welcome, Anastasia.
No, they soften up in the wash.
Okay, that's good to know.
Well, you're welcome, because I know you're not at the baby stage yet, but you're still in the honeymoon phase, and we've just spoiled a lot for you. But you can thank me later once you guys are ready to make that step. But
what he's trying to say is it gets better.
It does get better. It does.
And it doesn't have to break the bank.
It does not have to break the bank.
You don't have to be decentivized from reproducing like our culture would have you think.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's jump into one of the last stories I wanted to cover, because I want to end on some good news after our diaper fiasco. So this is from CNN.com, everyone's favorite news site. In the 6 months.
Oh no, we lost him.
Well,
Oh boy, we crashed there.
Hi.
Welcome back.
No idea what happened, but we crashed there. All right, well, I'll start
CNN,
over.
Honestly, it was CNN.
It probably was CNN.
the code word.
In the 6 months after the Supreme Court ruling that ended the federal right to an abortion, there were about 32,000 fewer abortions than expected in the United States, according to the new analysis. There were about 5,000 fewer legal abortions each month on average than there were in the months before the ruling, a drop of about 6%. In April and May, there were an average of about 82,000 abortions each month, according to the analysis. From July through December, that fell to an average of 77,000 abortions per month. The total number of abortions fluctuated month to month, but was always lower than it was in April. So there is our good news for the night. So, Katelyn, we'll go to you for your initial response on all those fewer abortions being done.
Yes, two things. The first one is my local pregnancy resource center that I talked to said they had multiple women coming in and saying they were glad that they didn't have a choice for abortion anymore because they realized they had to have the baby. And then they started researching, okay, what the heck am I going to do? And they found answers and they found solutions and they found confidence to have their baby. And they were actually glad that they could not get an abortion. The second thing is, to all the people that are now unable to get abortions, I would just really encourage them to choose adoption, because I know there's just loads of people out there wanting to adopt. And I know that pregnancy is not fun in a lot of people's minds. Also, giving birth is terrifying in a lot of people's minds, but it doesn't have to be. And adoption is just a much better option than abortion.
Yeah, absolutely. Anastasia, what was your initial reaction?
I mean, as great as it is to hear that numbers are falling, I think my biggest takeaway is that the fight isn't over. The fight for life will never be over. No matter how many laws are passed, no matter how many people convert. You know what I'm saying? Like, murder's been around since forever and a day, and so I want to encourage everyone, because I think sometimes when things start to get really, really great for us and we're super excited about things, we tend to be a little bit more lax. And it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, people talk about it, but this happened, or people talk about it, but that's great what Florida did, and that's great what I was in, all that kind of stuff. So I would just encourage people to still, talk to their friends about it, talk to people that they know about it, and spark conversation. Like I have this sweatshirt that I like to wear and this t-shirt that I like to wear that says "Save the Babies." And the amount of conversations I have with people being like, well, what do you mean? Or is that? People are like, who is that? Or what babies are you talking about? And the conversations that I start with people to help them to remember that this isn't over, that we're still fighting for these children, honestly, probably until, the good Lord takes us home.
And we're fighting misinformation, because I had friends that when Roe was overturned, they were like, oh, we don't know how we feel about that. And they were Christians, because they were like concerned about all these other things. And I'm like, well, all that stuff is lies. Women aren't going to die because Roe was overturned.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael and I have had conversations in the past as well. I think one of the immediate things that you heard when Roe v. Wade was overturned was so many people were saying, okay, you religious right, now you need to actually care about women from birth to natural death. And what was so interesting in our past conversations on this podcast is that oftentimes there were individuals, even in the church, who fell for that line of thinking. But the reality is, it's been proven statistically that there have been many, many generous people that would be, considered conservative evangelicals that have already been propping up these pregnancy centers from the get-go. So now we would just encourage those who have not been able to contribute to the fight to just step into the ring. Now, Michael, I wanted to see if you had an initial reaction to that as well.
I resonate what the girls are saying quite a bit. Ultimately, it's like, yeah, the war wages on, and we're really used to losing battles, but it sure feels nice to win one occasionally, and to be able to say, cool, 32,000. That's a formidable number, but the number of abortions that are still taking place is yet greater. So the war is not over, but it sure is nice to win a battle every now and then.
Absolutely. And I want to make sure that we had at least some good news, as we covered so many hard topics tonight. And boy, this was a roller coaster tonight, going through going through diapers and the like. But I actually wanted to transition just a little bit, because we just have a few minutes left here. Anastasia, I wanted to ask you how opening weekend went with your dad's film.
Yeah. People are really, really liking it. It's going really, really well. It's hard to combat with some of these bigger movies. But it has it has a higher Rotten Tomatoes score than like The Pope's Exorcist right now, which is, that kind of stuff is incredible. It has a very low critic scale because,
Naturally.
if it would take them to have to actually go see the movie and maybe actually think about who they are as people and who they are as themselves, but the people that are seeing it are loving it. I think one of the coolest stories that has been sent in to me, I don't know if you guys have watched the movie yet.
What is the movie?
Oh, yeah.
We gotta get Katelyn in on this.
I'm sorry.
No. It's funny, actually. You said the title earlier, so I wasn't trying to.
I was struggling too because I saw you crack a smile and I was just.
It's called Nefarious, actually, and you said that earlier, and I was like, but it is about a psychiatrist who goes to interview a man who's on death row who claims he's a demon. So, when I was telling them the last time, it's really marketed as a horror movie to the general public to really get them to go see it.
Sounds like it.
But it's more so a psychological thriller. And I really think I think it puts you and your faith in your place. And I think after seeing the movie now, I've seen it 9 times. After seeing this movie, I really feel like it's an important movie for the wrestlers out there. And what I mean by wrestlers is the people that, like I was talking about earlier, well, yeah, I'm not about that. Or I think, marriage should be between one man and one woman. And it poses that question in front of you, well, why? And it really wrestles with who you are and your identity. But I think it was something that was really cool is because the psychiatrist in the movie says he's an atheist. And so that's when they go back and forth and they have this really great dialogue between the two of them. And someone messaged me the Steve Dace Instagram over the weekend that I run and said that they brought their son who was an atheist, their son. And, they were nervous about bringing him, obviously, because, in the movie he says, quote, well, I'm an atheist. So it's kind of like pointing that target right at that son. And the mom was grateful because she said, her son actually really enjoyed it and really liked it. And they had a really engaging conversation afterwards. So, and that's what the movie is all about. Numbers are numbers, but people are souls, and so we're fighting for souls here, ultimately in this battle, whether it's abortion or transgenderism or whatever it is. So to see that this movie is impacting people on a spiritual level, I think you can't ask for anything better. And I would still encourage people to see it. And if they have seen it, to leave, a Rotten Tomatoes score on it.
So is it scary?
No. I would not say it's scary.
You've seen it 9 times. I don't know if that counts.
you have a couple jump scares in there. You know what I'm saying? But if you've ever seen or heard of the Conjuring movies, you're not gonna have people climbing on walls or people's heads spinning around. It's none of that. It's honestly just a super engaging dialogue that really makes you think about your own faith, who am I? What am I doing here? And it's really cool to see people bringing their friends who may kind of be on this tilting scale back and forth, and the conversations people are having afterwards with them. It's 100% worth it. And my favorite line from the movie is the psychiatrist says to the demon, Edward, he says, I didn't know that this was a fight. And the demon says, well, that's why you're losing. And I feel like every time I hear that line, it gives me chills because I don't think that there's a better sentence to describe where we're at as a society right now.
Yeah. I didn't have the chance to see it this weekend, partially because my wife wanted to get the input of Michael and his wife before we went and watched it, because my wife is just sensitive to those things. So that being said, Michael, how about you drop your review?
All right, I'll try to be concise because I could talk about it a while. But I'll tell you, if you're worried about it being horrifying, easily the most horrifying thing about the film was the trailers that they played before it, because it's marketed as a thriller horror film, but it isn't in itself. There's very limited graphic scenes, and they're not even as horrible as I thought they would be. It is very much akin to C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters in its nature, as far as an honest conversation between a demonic and an ignorant person, and the demonic is describing the tactics and ploys that he is associated with in order to conquer any semblance of goodness in our culture. And it covers a variety of topics, including euthanasia, abortion, cultural identity wars, political correctness, things like this. Really well executed dialogue. The actors, in particular the guy who plays the demon-possessed man, easily on par with the execution of like Heath Ledger in Batman Begins, or not Batman Begins, it would have been
Dark Knight.
The Dark Knight.
Yep.
But it's very much a Heath Ledger, Jack Nicholson vibes, but mixed in with kind of the best Joker plus Jekyll and Hyde is kind of the feeling that you get from his delivery. It's really high quality acting, and the film is very focused on that quality. It doesn't have a great quantity of spectrum. The whole film takes place in basically one localized place with only 4 or 5, maybe 6 speaking characters in the entire film. So it's very simple in its execution, but it's high quality, and that was really refreshing, especially for a largely dialogue-driven film that doesn't have a lot of action. It doesn't have a lot of outward excitement, which I could see that being a deterrent for some people. But if you're willing to have an honest conversation and think about things that may make you uncomfortable, I would say my wife and I both agreed that this movie didn't make us fearful, but it is not a comfortable movie. And that's by design. And it prompts some really good conversations. So highly recommended.
And if I may, honestly, I tweeted today because a lot of people are like, well, I don't like scary stuff, so I don't want to go see it. I don't like scary stuff. And my answer to that, if I'm just going to be brutally honest, is I don't know about you guys, but the Bible's pretty scary if you ask me. Because when you had a guy who came down to be put on a crown of thorns that go into his head and bleed all the way down to his face, a man who held nails into his hands, just punctured over and over again. I mean, it was whipped with swords and needles, and like, that's some pretty graphic stuff. The Bible is pretty R-rated if you ask me. And I would hope that you would agree, Michael, that this movie does not have any nudity in it. No, I mean, there's only like 2 obscenities, and they're very minor. You know what I'm saying? There's no F-bombs or anything like that. So my answer to people who say, well, I don't like scary movies, I don't want to go see it. Well, the Bible is scary, and it's scary because it's reality. And I feel like this movie is reality when they're having that conversation. Maybe you disagree, but that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
I agree.
best start believing in ghost stories because you're living in one. That's where my mind went.
Isn't that Pirates of the Caribbean?
That is
That's
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Caribbean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Hair Juicer 3000 said, heard good things about Nefarious. Good. Go see it. Pam Collins says, I'm going to see it for the second time tomorrow. I just didn't catch everything, only seen it once.
That was something Bethany and I said, was that we definitely want to see it again, which is usually a mark of a quality film, because we walked away thinking we could not have grasped everything that was delivered in that film, partially because it's so dialogue driven. There's just a lot that you don't catch the first time around.
Yeah. And then Pam Collins also said it's not scary, it's intense. And then she said, I wonder if Sean Flannery had any weird feelings playing a demon. Yeah, I'm sure that would be wild trip. You mentioned Heath Ledger, and it's like, yeah, same idea, that psychological
Well, he did a remarkable job of it.
weight. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for giving us that update, Anastasia, and thank you, Michael, for your review. We'll go ahead and wrap up here, but Anastasia, where can people find you to keep up with everything you're doing?
Yeah, I use my Twitter, honestly, the most. It's just my name, Anastasia Hibbs. That's kind of what I use the most. And I am on the Steve Day Show twice a week now. I'm on there on Tuesdays and then Thursdays as well. So you can catch me on there.
Awesome. Katelyn, where can people keep up with you?
I have Twitter and Instagram. So Katelyn James, pro-life hiker for Instagram, and Katelyn Tweeter for Twitter.
Perfect. Michael, where can people find you?
I'll be sifting through 3 or 4 different commentaries on Romans over the next 12 to 15 hours and figuring out what Romans 7 really means.
Excellent. Give us a full report next week.
In writing, I'll do it.
Yes, please. Well, thank you everyone for watching. We appreciate it. We have been Forge and Anvil, and we'll see you next time.